Peter Parker swung above the city, the wind tearing past him as he gripped his web lines with practiced ease. New York stretched below like a living circuit board, neon lights flickering across streets lined with taxis and hurried pedestrians. The hum of life, of traffic, of sirens was the rhythm he knew, the rhythm that grounded him. But tonight, the rhythm broke. Stark Industries had promised a minor energy calibration test of the arc reactor matrix, and Peter, ever the curious kid in the lab coat, had insisted on observing. The test began smoothly enough. Blue light pulsed along the edges of the reactor, arcs of energy tracing perfect curves through the air. Peter leaned forward, snapping photos, grinning at the hum of power. But then came the shimmer, the distortion in the air above the reactor. The energy bent unnaturally, twisting the ceiling, bending reality. Peter's grin faltered. Something wasn't right, and before anyone could react, the room erupted in a violent, sucking wind. Glass shattered, alarms blared, and a screaming vortex tore through the lab. Peter barely had time to act. His spider sense screamed, a piercing premonition of danger as the floor seemed to vanish beneath him. Instinct took over. He shot a web line to the far wall and flipped backward, but the pull of the vortex was relentless. Stark's engineers were being hurled through the air like rag dolls. Sparks danced across the walls, the machinery groaning under the unnatural stress. Then a sharp tearing pain ripped through Peter's chest, a sensation like being stretched inside out, pulled through dimensions. And then everything went black. One moment he was in the lab, the next he was falling through an endless void of shadows and jagged lights. Shapes twisted in impossible angles. Colors he didn't know existed bled into one another. Time itself seemed liquid, dripping and folding. Peter's stomach churned as gravity abandoned him, and his heart hammered in his chest, a frantic drummer in the silent chaos. He felt utterly alone, suspended in a storm that was not of this earth. When he landed, it was with a sickening, bone-jarring thud. He rolled instinctively, scanning the alien landscape. The sky above was a bruised red, streaked with black lightning that forked across clouds heavier than any storm on Earth. The city around him was massive, impossibly tall towers of steel and stone, stained with grime, smoke, and the glow of fires that burned without mercy. Massive bridges arched between the buildings, filled with moving silhouettes, but the figures were twisted, armored in ways he had never seen, carrying weapons that screamed death in his gut. Peter struggled to stand, his limbs trembling from both fear and exhaustion. The streets were alive with a terrible hum, not of engines or traffic, but a low, vibrating pulse that seemed to echo through the ground and into his bones. Something primal stirred in him, an instinctual warning. His spider sense flared violently. He was not in New York anymore. He was somewhere else entirely, somewhere that radiated danger like a beacon, a universe consumed by roar, cruelty, and something far darker than any villain he had faced. He tried to rationalize, as he always did, as the scientist in him kicked in. Some kind of dimensional tear, he muttered, brushing soot from his costume. Energy fluctuation, unknown particle field. Maybe some kind of warped anomaly? The words sounded hollow even to him. He had studied interdimensional physics, but nothing had prepared him for this. The air smelled wrong, metallic, acrid, almost alive. And somewhere in the distance he heard it. A scream. Not human, not animal, something in between. It chilled him to the bone. His first instinct was to help. He sprinted toward the noise, leaping from twisted rooftops, web-swinging across the gnarled spires. The city was a labyrinth, each street deeper and more chaotic than the last, filled with shadows that seemed to move with intent. Fires raged in buildings, molten streams carving through streets like rivers of blood. Peter's mind raced. I'm Spider-Man. I fix problems. I save people. I protect, wherever I am. The mantra gave him courage, though his gut warned him that this world did not reward heroes. The screams led him to a gang of figures, armored and grotesque, surrounding terrified civilians. They wielded weapons that crackled with dark energy, and their eyes glowed with something unnatural. Peter's fists clenched, adrenaline surging. He swung into action, webs lashing like whips, knocking one attacker off a ledge, then another into a burning barrel. But the more he fought, the more he realized these weren't petty criminals. They were soldiers of chaos, fanatics in a universe where morality was meaningless, and he was dangerously out of place. Peter paused atop a crumbling balcony, breathing heavily, surveying the carnage. The civilians were safe for now, huddled in the shadows. He had no idea how he had arrived here or if he could ever return home, but one thought struck him with clarity. I'm still Spider-Man, and I'm going to do what I do best, no matter how impossible it gets. As the red sky thundered above and distant screams echoed from the depths of the city, Peter Parker, the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, realized that being a hero in this world would test every limit of his courage, his morality, and his humanity. Peter Parker landed on a narrow ledge several stories above the street, his lungs burning, his muscles aching from the sudden transition between dimensions. The red-tinged sky of this alien world stretched endlessly, a storm of black clouds split by jagged lightning that cast fleeting shadows over the Hive city below. Towering structures stretched miles high, connected by rusted bridges, steel cables, and precarious scaffolding. The architecture was monstrous, gothic, mechanical, and alive, as if the city itself were breathing. Smoke curled from every level, mixing with the stench of decay, oil, and rot. From his vantage point, Peter could see movement in the streets below. Figures scuttled along catwalks and stairways, armored in mismatched metal plates, carrying weapons that glowed with unnatural energy. The civilians, if they could even be called that, moved in hunched lines, shuffling past machinery and gangs of enforcers. Children darted from shadows, clutching whatever scraps of food they could find. Peter's heart sank. The chaos and oppression of New York gangs seemed trivial compared to this grinding, endless suffering. He swung down closer to the streets, careful to avoid drawing attention, and landed silently on a balcony covered in grime. The sound of distant hammers on molten metal echoed through the city, blending with the groans of machinery and the occasional roar of monstrous engines. The sheer scale of the place was dizzying. Peter's eyes scanned for some logical explanation. Was this an industrial planet or something more sinister? There were no stars, only layers of smoke and fire. Moving forward cautiously, Spider-Man ducked into a narrow alleyway where shadows clung like a second skin. Steam hissed from pipes overhead, the hot air stinging his eyes. Rat-like figures scuttled in the darkness, some humanoid, some twisted beyond any recognition. He realized quickly, this city was alive and it was hungry. Every movement seemed to watch him, every shadow threatened him. His spider sense tingled constantly, forcing him to slow his pace, calculate every step. Peter spotted a group of civilians being harassed by hooded figures wielding jagged energy blades. Without hesitation, he leaped into action, webs flying. One cultist went sailing into a burning barrel, another crashed against a wall as Peter's webline yanked him backward. The civilians froze, wide-eyed, unsure if this bizarre red and blue figure was friend or demon. Peter offered a quick, reassuring smile, but he knew that in this universe, trust was a dangerous luxury. Once the attackers fled, Peter approached the civilians. They were thin, pale, their eyes hollow from starvation or fear. A small boy tugged at his mother's sleeve, pointing at Peter's mask. Peter crouched, speaking softly. "It's okay. You're safe. For now. Go." The mother nodded, dragging the children into the alleyways. Peter's chest tightened. This isn't New York. There's no police, no system, just survival. I can help them, but there's no way I can fix this city alone. Moving deeper into the hive, he noticed the structures shifting unnaturally. Bridges bent at impossible angles, machinery whirred with a rhythm that almost mimicked a heartbeat. Giant banners depicting grim symbols of skulls, gears, and serpentine shapes hung from towers. He recognized some vaguely from comics and history, stylized, warped versions of imperial or chaos imagery, but nothing here was comforting. The city's sheer oppressive weight made the hairs on his neck stand on end. Peter climbed a tall spire to get a better view. From the top, he saw that the hive wasn't just a city, it was a fortress, a labyrinth, a prison. Endless layers of industry and habitation stacked like tiers of some cruel cake. Fires blazed in factories, feeding enormous furnaces. Smoke columns rose like pillars, choking out sunlight, though there wasn't much to begin with. And through it all, creatures and soldiers moved like ants, driven by unseen masters. As he swung down into a market level, Peter observed the stark contrast between oppressors and oppressed. Merchants huddled under rusted canopies, selling scraps of food, worn clothing, and bizarre trinkets to survivalists and guards alike. Armed enforcers patrolled the streets, meting out violence for the smallest infractions. A man whispered something to his companion and vanished into a hidden passage. Peter realized that fear was currency here, and his webs could only stretch so far. Turning a corner, he came upon a massive square where a crowd had gathered. On a raised platform, an armored figure barked orders, brandishing a glowing rod that lashed the backs of the terrified citizens below. Peter's stomach twisted. Public punishment, ritualistic, brutal, and dehumanizing. His spider sense screamed, warning him of latent danger. The figure's helmeted face turned toward him briefly, and though Peter couldn't see eyes, he felt the weight of judgment. I can't save everyone. I can't even save most. He decided to retreat temporarily, seeking higher ground. As he ascended, he passed a series of workshops where cybernetic modifications were performed on unwilling subjects. Screams echoed from behind metal doors, punctuated by whirring machinery. Peter felt bile rise in his throat. This is industrialization as oppression, a world where the weak are crushed for the benefit of the powerful. And yet, someone survives. Someone resists. His resolve hardened. He would be that someone. Spider-Man swung into the shadowed upper tiers where fewer civilians roamed and machinery hummed with greater intensity. Here, he could feel the city's heartbeat most clearly, the pulse of labor, pain, and enforced loyalty. Pipes carried steam and blood alike, twisting through the towers in a grotesque symphony. He spotted a patrol of armored guards below and noted their formation, their weapons, their rigid discipline. He made a mental map. If I'm going to survive here, I need to learn the rules or invent my own. In a narrow passageway, Peter encountered another human survivor, a young woman with a scarred face and wary eyes. She held a crude weapon, not out of aggression, but caution. "Who? What are you?" she demanded. Peter raised his hands in peace. "Name's Peter. I'm not here." She studied him, suspicion warring with curiosity. "No one just appears here. You've crossed the veil. The warp took you." Peter's jaw tightened. Warp. That explains the dimensional shift. But why me? Why here? She introduced herself as Lyra, a scavenger and guide through the hive's labyrinth. She warned him of patrols, chaos cults, and worse, the monstrous entities that hunted indiscriminately. Peter listened carefully, absorbing every detail, every nuance. Lyra spoke of invisible hierarchies, of families enslaved, of markets controlled by power-hungry warlords. Every word painted a darker picture of this world than he could have imagined. And yet, the thought of leaving innocence to die gnawed at him. Lyra led Peter down twisting staircases and rusted catwalks, avoiding patrols and weaving through abandoned industrial complexes. Along the way, Peter witnessed entire blocks of the city abandoned. Buildings collapsed into one another, victims of previous battles or environmental collapse. This isn't just a war, it's a grind, a machine that chews people up and spits them out. The thought unsettled him, yet he pressed onward, knowing he had to keep moving if he wanted answers and survival. They reached a hidden courtyard where small communities of survivors had carved out fragile niches. Children played with scraps of metal and wire, mimicking the combat they saw daily. Peter's heart ached, but he forced a smile. I can help them, even just a little. He started showing basic maneuvers, using webs to lift heavy objects, create temporary bridges, and distract patrolling guards. Lyra watched silently, perhaps surprised at his ingenuity, perhaps skeptical. Either way, he earned their cautious trust. As night fell, though the hive's light pollution made it hard to discern darkness, Peter and Lyra rested in a narrow alcove, catching their breath. "How do you do it?" she asked finally, curiosity replacing suspicion. "How do you keep hope?" Peter thought of New York, of Uncle Ben, of the people he'd saved countless times. "I don't, always," he admitted. "But I try, and I can't stop trying, no matter the odds." Lyra's eyes softened slightly. Maybe he's different. Maybe there's still something pure left in this broken world. Suddenly, a low hum vibrated through the courtyard. Spider sense flared violently. He vaulted to a high perch, peering across the rooftops. Shadows moved unnaturally, elongated, twisted by some malevolent force. Lyra grabbed his arm, fear evident. "The warp is near," she whispered. Peter's stomach clenched. This was more than a city at war. This was a place where reality itself was unstable, where darkness could take tangible form. And somehow, he was in the center of it. Peter realized the magnitude of what he faced. This wasn't just a city of criminals or warlords. It was a city crawling with forces beyond human comprehension, forces that could annihilate him in moments if he wasn't careful. But with every step, every leap across grimy rooftops, he understood the challenge. I am Spider-Man. I adapt, I survive, and I fight. The mantra strengthened his resolve, though he had no idea what lay ahead. As dawn, or the closest approximation of it, broke through the dense smoke, Peter perched atop a gargoyle-shaped spire, surveying the hive below. Fires burned, citizens scurried, patrols moved with clockwork precision, and the city hummed with its relentless, oppressive rhythm. Peter Parker, the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, took a deep breath. He had entered the heart of Warhammer's grimdark nightmare.
And somehow he would survive. Somehow he would fight.
Spider-Man moved cautiously through the narrow upper tiers of the hive, his eyes scanning every shadow. The city below was a living organism of smoke, fire, and steel, and every movement seemed alive with menace. His spider sense flared constantly, warning him of threats that lurked beyond sight. Every alleyway, every scaffold, every balcony could conceal enemies, or worse, patrols of the Inquisition. He had heard Lyra speak of the Inquisition in hushed tones. They were hunters of heretics, mutants, and anyone who might threaten the Imperium's fragile order. To her and the people she helped, the Inquisition was as feared as chaos itself. And now, after days of observing the hive, Peter realized he had caught their attention. Strange markings were scrawled in the streets below, symbols of vigilance, warning all who saw them.
Peter crouched on a high ledge, watching two armored figures move through the smoke. Their robes and ceramite plates gleamed under the red sky, their helmets concealing any hint of humanity. One carried a staff that crackled with energy. The other bore an ornate pistol etched with skulls and gears. These were no ordinary enforcers. These were inquisitors, and they moved with the precision of predators. The spider sense screamed louder. Peter's instincts screamed for stealth, for retreat. But he had seen the terror these figures inflicted upon civilians, and a part of him refused to hide. He decided to shadow them from above, using the twisting spires as cover, hoping to understand their intent without being noticed. As he followed, he noticed a pattern. The Inquisitors were not just hunting randomly. They moved toward districts rife with cultist activity, interrogating anyone who seemed out of place. Citizens were dragged into shadowed alleys, subjected to brutal questioning. Peter winced, recognizing the parallels to the criminals he fought in New York, but magnified, warped by the grimdark universe he now inhabited. At one intersection, a young man was seized, thrown to the ground. The Inquisitor's staff crackled with energy, probing the boy's mind. Peter's stomach twisted. Mind probing? That's more than I usually deal with. He wanted to swing down, intervene, but hesitated. Any direct action risked exposing himself, and these weren't petty thugs. These were professional, trained, and deadly. Instead, he focused on observation, taking mental notes of their movements, tactics, and communication. He realized quickly that he could use his agility to manipulate their perception. Shadows, high perches, and sudden distractions could give him an edge if confrontation became unavoidable.
Peter's calculations were interrupted by a distant scream. A cultist, perhaps, or a civilian caught in a crackdown. He swung toward the sound, landing on a catwalk overlooking a narrow street. Below, a small crowd of civilians cowered as an inquisitor raised a gauntleted hand, summoning a device that unleashed a crackling bolt of psychic energy. The blast hurled a man through a wall, leaving a smear of blood and ruin. The horror of the act struck Peter hard. In New York, he had fought villains who killed, yes, but rarely in such impersonal, ritualistic brutality. Here, death was not just punishment. It was a display of absolute power, a warning etched into the psyche of every onlooker. Peter's heart pounded. I'm going to have to be smarter than I've ever been to survive here. He swung into action, not to fight, not yet, but to create a distraction. A well-aimed webline tore across a scaffold, sending a cascade of tools and scrap metal crashing down into the street below. Civilians scattered, giving Peter cover, while the Inquisitors looked upward, searching for the source. For a fleeting moment, he felt alive. The thrill of movement, the precision of webs, the old sense of purpose. But the exhilaration was brief. One Inquisitor's helmet pivoted toward him, sensing his presence. Peter's spider sense screamed, a stabbing alarm in his skull. He shot across the rooftops, leaping from spire to spire, weaving through smoke and fire. The city's layout, which had been an ally in exploration, now became a labyrinthine trap. He realized that the Inquisitors were not merely human hunters. They were augmented, psychic, trained to detect anomalies.
Even his spider sense, powerful though it was, struggled to anticipate the sheer cunning of their methods. Each leap, each maneuver required calculation and instinct in equal measure.
Landing silently behind a massive pipe, Peter caught his breath. He scanned the streets below, noting patrol patterns and the distribution of civilians. I can't fight them head-on. Not yet. I need allies, knowledge, maybe even a weapon of my own. He had already begun improvising web-enhanced traps and defenses, but against the Inquisition, it might not be enough. Lyra appeared silently from the shadows, her presence a relief. "You've been seen," she whispered urgently. "You're marked now. The Inquisition doesn't forgive mistakes." Peter nodded. He had suspected as much. "What do I do?" he asked. She looked around warily, her eyes sharp. "We hide, we plan, we survive. And maybe, if we're lucky, we find someone who can teach you how to fight on their terms." They navigated the rooftops, moving through industrial scaffolds, pipes, and ruined towers. Lyra explained what little she knew. The Inquisitors operated with near-total autonomy, reporting only to hidden masters. Their primary goal was to eliminate heresy, mutations, and anomalies, and Spider-Man, with his alien powers, clearly qualified. He felt the weight of the universe pressing down. Survival here was not about heroics, it was about strategy, observation, and cunning. As night fell, Peter and Lyra found refuge in an abandoned observatory, perched atop a massive spire. From here, he could see the expanse of the Hive, the fires burning in districts far below, and the occasional patrol of armored figures moving methodically through the city. Peter reflected on the magnitude of what he faced. This was not New York. This was a war machine in constant motion, and he was a single, vulnerable figure within it. Lyra shared rumors she had heard about other factions, rogue traders, minor cults, and the occasional chaos entity that moved unseen. She warned Peter that not all threats came from the Inquisition, and that trust was a luxury few could afford. Peter listened carefully, processing the information while scanning the city for movement. He had survived street gangs, supervillains, and alien invasions before, but this was something else entirely. A sudden flash of movement caught his eye. From a distance, a figure emerged from the smoke, cloaked in tattered robes that shifted unnaturally. The air around it seemed to warp. Peter's spider sense screamed. He knew immediately this was no ordinary human. Lyra stiffened beside him, whispering, "A warp-tainted soul, a daemon in waiting. We need to move." Peter calculated the risks. Engaging it now would be suicide, but retreating without knowledge could be equally dangerous. He improvised. A web line shot to a nearby spire, pulling them both to safety. The figure paused, sensing their presence, then vanished into the city, leaving behind a residue of psychic corruption that set Peter's teeth on edge. "The warp is closer than I thought," Peter muttered. Lyra nodded grimly. "It seeps into the Hive, warping reality, influencing both citizens and hunters alike. It's dangerous and unpredictable." Peter's mind raced. "I've faced impossible odds before. I've swung into the heart of danger countless times. But this is something else entirely." That night, he practiced web traps and surveillance techniques, setting lines to alert him to patrols or warp-tainted entities. His mind worked tirelessly, combining science, ingenuity, and instinct. Every trap was an experiment, every observation a lesson. He had no mentor here, no guide, only survival, and the faint hope that he could help someone, anyone, without being discovered. As dawn approached, though the hive's fires and smoke blurred the distinction, Peter perched atop a balcony, watching patrols move through the streets below. He realized the hive was both a labyrinth and a prison, a city of steel and shadow designed to crush spirit. Yet within its depths, pockets of resistance persisted, and he, an alien in this world, could become a symbol or a target. Peter felt the first heavy pangs of isolation. New York, with its friends, his Aunt May, and the people he knew, seemed impossibly distant. Here, he was anonymous, powerless in many ways, yet uniquely capable in others. The paradox gnawed at him. He was a hero without a city, a protector without a home. As the first light of the artificial dawn filtered through the smoky haze, Peter vowed to himself he would learn this city, understand its factions, and survive. He would not be hunted without a fight. He would not stand idle while innocents suffered, and he would find a way back home, one way or another. With renewed determination, Spider-Man leapt into the rising chaos of the hive, blending with the shadows, swinging through the scorched towers, and weaving through the labyrinthian streets. He had entered the heart of the Inquisition's domain, and though danger lurked in every corner, he knew one immutable truth. He would fight, he would endure, and somehow he would prevail.
Spider-Man perched atop a spire that loomed above the hive's twisting streets, the red-tinged glow of fires below casting long, flickering shadows across the Gothic architecture. The city hummed with life and decay at once, a pulse of smoke, steel, and grinding machinery. He could see citizens scuttling through narrow alleys, their faces etched with exhaustion and fear, and patrols of armored inquisitors moving with calculated precision, their boots echoing across catwalks and metal scaffoldings. Every movement below, every shifting shadow, made his spider sense flare and warning. He had never felt so small, so vulnerable, yet so alive. The city was a maze of threats and possibilities, and he knew he had to adapt quickly or be swallowed whole by the grim, dark machinery around him. The thought of the civilians, hiding, starving, and suffering, tightened a knot in his chest, pushing him to act despite the overwhelming danger. Lyra followed silently behind him, her presence a reminder that he wasn't entirely alone. Her movements were deliberate and precise, each step measured as if she were one with the scaffolds and catwalks. "You can't fight this city alone," she said quietly, her eyes scanning the streets below. "Even you." Peter understood the weight of her words. In New York, he had faced enemies alone all the time, relying on agility, instinct, and his quick thinking. But the hive was a different beast entirely, alive with cruelty, war, and forces he could barely comprehend. He nodded, acknowledging that he would need guidance, allies, and strategy if he was to survive and protect anyone here. He glanced down at the glowing streets below, mentally marking patrol routes, escape paths, and possible strongholds, already planning how to use the city's verticality to his advantage. Their first objective was a hidden enclave of survivors and minor rebels who resisted the chaos cults quietly, their existence whispered in rumors and shadowed conversations. Lyra led him through a maze of back alleys, rusted conduits, and decaying scaffolding, pointing out safe routes and potential ambush points along the way. Peter moved with precision, swinging from line to line, landing on narrow beams and catwalks with a practiced ease that belied the city's alien danger. The hive stretched endlessly around them, layers of industrial machinery, collapsed buildings, and grotesque statues rising like guardians of a nightmarish civilization. Every corner, every shadow seemed to watch him, and he adjusted his movements to stay hidden, learning quickly that stealth and observation were just as powerful as his webs. When they finally reached the hidden courtyard of the survivors, Peter was met with cautious, wary eyes. Men and women emerged from shadows, some armed with makeshift weapons and patched armor, their expressions a mixture of curiosity, skepticism, and hope. Peter raised his hands in a gesture of peace, speaking softly. "I'm here to help," he said. "I can fight off the cultists, protect civilians," and he didn't get to finish as a sudden roar tore through the air, sending everyone ducking instinctively. Peter's gaze snapped toward the noise, his heart hammering. Cultists had attacked, dragging terrified civilians toward a nearby furnace, their faces twisted in zealotry and madness. Without hesitation, Spider-Man leaped into action, swinging down with fluid precision. Webs lashed across the cultists, tangling limbs, yanking them against walls and creating improvised barriers from rubble and hanging scaffolds. Civilians screamed, running blindly through narrow alleys, some tripping over debris as Peter guided them to safety. "This way! Follow me!" His voice carried authority, instinctively drawing the terrified survivors toward shelter. He moved with a rhythm he hadn't felt in days, every leap and swing combining agility, intelligence, and instinct, weaving through the chaos as if he were part of the hive itself. Lyra followed closely, her own skills honed from years of survival in the hive. She pointed out hidden ambush points and structural weaknesses in the cultists' path, giving Peter a tactical advantage. Together they moved as a unit, blending agility and knowledge to protect civilians and disrupt the cultists. Peter realized for the first time in this city that he wasn't alone in his struggle. Small victories, fleeting though they were, began to build a sense of purpose amidst the grim landscape of oppression, fire, and steel. The battle continued, brutal and chaotic. Cultists lunged with energy blades, fired crude firearms, and chanted incantations that warped reality in minor, unsettling ways. Webs alone could not contain them indefinitely, so Peter improvised using chains, scaffolds, and molten pipes as tools, shields, and traps. Each movement required calculation and instinct, blending his superhero skills with the environment, adapting on the fly to threats he had never imagined. The civilians, terrified but alive, followed the duo, their trust in Spider-Man growing with each narrow escape. Eventually, the cultists were dispersed, some fleeing into the labyrinthine city, others incapacitated by webs and debris. Peter surveyed the aftermath, feeling a mixture of exhaustion and grim satisfaction. "We can't save everyone like this," he admitted, the weight of the hive pressing down on him. "But maybe we can protect pockets, safe zones where people can survive." The survivors nodded silently, understanding that small victories mattered more than grand gestures in a city designed to crush hope. The Hidden Enclave's leaders approached him cautiously, their expressions shifting from skepticism to curiosity. A graying, battle-hardened man stepped forward, his eyes sharp and evaluating. "If you wish to fight here, we can teach you our ways, survival strategies for the hive. But understand this, it is a brutal world. The Inquisition hunts anyone, and chaos never sleeps." Peter nodded, absorbing the gravity of the warning. He had survived impossible odds before, but this was not New York. This was a city of unending danger, where the rules of life and death were twisted and unpredictable. Over the following days, Peter trained with the Enclave, learning the intricacies of Hive navigation, combat tactics, and civilian protection strategies. Lyra became his primary guide, teaching him the hidden passages, weak scaffolds, and escape routes unknown to outsiders. Peter's science-minded mind began to integrate with the city's architecture, creating web-based defenses, alarm systems, and improvised weapons from scrap materials. Each exercise honed his abilities, blending his natural reflexes with the Hive's unforgiving environment. Night patrols became a regular part of their routine. Spider-Man moved through the shadows with calculated precision, detecting cultist movements, intercepting attacks, and rescuing trapped civilians. His webs became tools of containment, distraction, and defense, more than weapons, and he began improvising techniques suited specifically to this world's hazards. Each night sharpened his skills. Each encounter taught him the value of observation and patience. One night, a particularly aggressive group of cultists ambushed the Enclave, their forms distorted by minor warp corruption. Spider-Man's reflexes and webs were pushed to their limits, dodging psychic attacks, redirecting energy blasts, and using the environment to his advantage. Lyra and the Enclave fought alongside him, but the cultists' relentless aggression reminded Peter that this city would never yield easy victories. Every fight was a test of endurance, strategy, and adaptability. After the fight, Peter helped secure the Enclave, reinforcing barricades, setting up web-based traps, and organizing evacuation routes. He realized that his superhero instincts, honed in New York, had to evolve. The Hive was not a place for flashy heroics. It demanded subtlety, planning, and the ability to improvise under pressure. He began to see himself not just as a fighter, but as a guardian of hope in a city designed to extinguish it. Conversations with Lyra revealed the fragile social dynamics within the Hive. Families struggled to maintain cohesion, workers endured brutal conditions, and alliances were constantly shifting. Peter absorbed every detail, understanding that knowledge and empathy were as crucial as webs and reflexes. He began to map out patterns of movement, power, and influence, preparing himself for challenges far greater than random cultist attacks. One evening, a young girl approached him, her eyes wide with curiosity and fear. "Why do you fight?" she asked, her voice trembling. Peter crouched to meet her gaze, answering with quiet conviction. "Because someone has to. Even in the darkest places, we can make a difference. And because I can't ignore people in need." The girl nodded slowly, running off to warn others, and Peter felt a flicker of hope amidst the relentless darkness. Word of Spider-Man's deeds began to spread, whispered by terrified but grateful civilians. The red and blue savior, the one who swings between towers, the web of faith. Peter understood the power of symbols, even in a world dominated by fear and oppression. He did not see himself as a saint or hero, merely a man trying to protect others, yet the image of him gave people something they had not felt in years: hope. The Enclave grew bolder with his presence, joining him in nighttime patrols, setting traps and rescuing civilians. Together, they disrupted minor cultist operations, gathered intelligence, and provided temporary relief to trapped communities. Spider-Man realized that influence here was built not through force alone, but through inspiration, coordination, and careful strategy. The city itself became an ally of sorts. Peter learned to anticipate structural weaknesses, use machinery as cover, and navigate complex vertical routes unseen by enemies. His webs intertwined with the city's scaffolds, creating a network of mobility, surveillance, and defense that allowed him and the Enclave to operate efficiently, striking quickly and vanishing before retaliation could occur. Despite these small victories, danger never relented. Cultist activity escalated, and Peter began encountering signs of warp corruption spreading through the Hive. Twisted forms, psychic disturbances, and areas where reality itself seemed unstable. These manifestations tested not only his reflexes, but his courage and judgment. Survival in this world was as much mental as physical. Lyra warned him constantly, emphasizing the importance of patience, observation, and discretion. "The Inquisition watches," she reminded him. "You may save lives today, but tomorrow you could be hunted. Always expect the unexpected." Peter absorbed her words, realizing that in the Hive, every action had consequences far beyond what he had experienced in New York. One patrol revealed a cultist ritual in progress, summoning a minor warp entity in a courtyard filled with civilians. Peter reacted instantly, swinging from above, using webs to disrupt the ritual and shield the innocent. Lyra and the Enclave coordinated their movements, combining agility, timing, and strategy to overcome overwhelming odds. The battle was fierce, testing every skill Spider-Man had acquired since entering the Hive.
After the fight, Peter assessed the aftermath, noting casualties, damage, and the persistence of cultist influence. Every victory was fragile, every safe zone temporary. Yet each success built morale among the Enclave, strengthening the small flame of resistance against the Hive's pervasive darkness. Spider-Man began to develop new web techniques, integrating them with environmental hazards. Molten pipes, swinging chains, and unstable scaffolds became part of his arsenal, allowing him to channel both defense and offense in a way that maximized efficiency while minimizing exposure. Civilians began to take note, following his guidance and learning improvised safety measures. Spider-Man realized that survival in the Hive was contagious. Hope, once kindled, spread, giving people the courage to resist oppression in small ways. Even simple actions, moving safely through alleyways, avoiding patrols, signaling danger, became revolutionary acts in a city built on fear. The title Web of Faith gained traction, whispered in alleyways, marketplaces, and hidden courtyards. People began to rally quietly, inspired by the figure who risked himself to protect the helpless. Peter felt the weight of the symbol, understanding that it could carry as much responsibility as it did hope. Nights grew longer, patrols more dangerous, and warp manifestations more frequent. Spider-Man adapted, combining speed, agility, and intelligence to anticipate attacks, evade detection, and protect civilians. His connection with Lyra and the Enclave deepened, fostering a network of trust and cooperation essential for survival. A major cultist attack forced Peter and his allies to improvise under extreme pressure. Using webs, traps, and the environment strategically, they disrupted enemy formations, protected civilians, and contained the warp-tainted forces temporarily. The battle tested every lesson Peter had learned, reinforcing his adaptability and determination. In the aftermath, Peter reflected on the fragile victories, realizing that the Hive's oppression could not be defeated outright. Instead, he focused on creating pockets of safety, networks of communication, and systems of defense that could persist even if he were absent. Small successes, he understood, mattered more than sweeping heroics. As dawn broke, or the closest approximation in the smoke-filled sky, Spider-Man surveyed the hive from a high spire, the city stretching endlessly below. Fires burned, patrols moved, and civilians emerged cautiously from hiding. He felt a quiet sense of purpose, knowing that while darkness persisted, so too did hope. With renewed determination, Spider-Man leapt into the labyrinthine city, swinging through scaffolds, twisting catwalks and burning streets, ready to face whatever threats the hive would throw at him next. He had allies, strategy, and hope, fragile yet persistent. And though danger and darkness surrounded him, he would fight, adapt, and protect, one web at a time, solidifying his place as the web of faith. The hive shuddered under the weight of its own machinery, a symphony of grinding metal, hissing steam, and distant screams. Fires raged through lower districts, casting flickering shadows that twisted grotesquely across the towering spires. Spider-Man perched high above the chaos, his mask reflecting the crimson glow as he scanned the streets below. Patrols of cultists, more organized and aggressive than before, moved in hunting formations, dragging terrified civilians toward industrial furnaces and rusted gates. He could feel the pulse of the city through his spider sense, danger everywhere, ready to strike at any mistake, any miscalculated leap. Lyra emerged from the shadows, her face taut with tension. "They've grown bolder," she said. "Something is directing them now. A leader, or worse, a warp-touched sorcerer. Civilians are being slaughtered faster than we can evacuate them." Spider-Man nodded grimly, scanning the streets. The hive was alive with movement, shadows stretching unnaturally, machinery grinding with a rhythm that almost mimicked the heartbeat of the city itself. Each step he took, each web line shot across scaffolds, was measured, deliberate, a dance between survival and intervention. They moved swiftly through the vertical labyrinth of the hive, using catwalks, rusted conduits, and narrow alleyways as cover. Spider-Man had learned to interpret the city's architecture as a weapon and a shield, turning spires into vantage points and molten pipes into improvised traps. Below, cultists tore through marketplaces, chanting incomprehensible words that warped the air, leaving faint traces of psychic disturbance in their wake. Peter's spider sense flared constantly, warning him of threats, both mundane and supernatural, and he adjusted his movements in real time, swinging with precision, ducking behind twisted girders, and vaulting across scaffolds. A cry echoed from a lower level. A child had been cornered, screaming as a warp-touched cultist approached, its body elongated and twisted, energy crackling unnaturally around jagged claws. Peter's web shot instantly, yanking the creature backward into a stack of scaffolding, while simultaneously swinging down to scoop up the terrified child. Lyra followed, clearing a path through debris and unconscious cultists, and together they brought the child to a temporary safe zone among the hidden enclave. Every rescue was fleeting, yet each one mattered. Spider-Man noticed a pattern in the cultists' behavior. Unlike previous random attacks, these assaults were coordinated, deliberate, almost strategic. Someone, or something, was directing them, shaping their movements, enhancing their lethality. His mind raced, analyzing weak points, escape routes, and environmental advantages. The hive was no longer just a backdrop. It was a participant, its collapsing scaffolds and unstable walkways a potential ally if he used them wisely. The first major confrontation erupted in a courtyard dominated by an enormous furnace. Cultists had cornered a group of civilians, their warp-tainted forms glowing with sickly light as they prepared to unleash a psychic attack. Spider-Man swung in from above, webs flying like precision-guided projectiles, entangling limbs, disarming attackers, and yanking them into walls. He used the environment ruthlessly, collapsing scaffolding onto groups, redirecting molten pipes to create barriers, and improvising constantly to offset the cultists' supernatural abilities. Lyra coordinated with the hidden Enclave, directing civilians to improvised shelters, while the Enclave members attacked with scavenged weapons, aiming to distract and destabilize the cultists. Peter realized that teamwork was essential. Solo heroics alone would not suffice against this scale of threat. Every swing, every web, every calculated misdirection became part of a complex ballet of survival, designed to maximize protection for the innocents while minimizing exposure to himself and allies. The warp-touched cultists proved far more dangerous than anything he had faced before. One lunged with elongated claws crackling with dark energy, tearing through reinforced scaffolds as easily as cardboard. Spider-Man reacted instinctively, swinging his webline around a girder to trip the creature and yanking it into a molten pipe. Sparks flew, energy arced, and the twisted forms howled in pain, their psychic scream vibrating through the metal structures. Each battle tested not just his agility, but his mental endurance. Civilians were in constant peril, and Peter's focus split between offense and rescue. He learned to use his webs not only to ensnare enemies, but to create rapid evacuation routes, pulling terrified civilians out of danger zones while simultaneously manipulating environmental hazards against their attackers. Every moment was a calculation of risk versus reward, instinct versus planning, and he adapted fluidly, pushing his skills beyond anything he had done in New York. As the battle progressed, Spider-Man realized the cultists were attempting to perform a larger ritual, something that could amplify the warp's influence in the Hive. Arcane symbols glowed on the ground, etched in a mixture of blood and energy, while cultists chanted in unison, their voices warping the very air. Peter's mind raced, understanding that failure would mean devastation not just for the civilians he protected, but for entire districts of the Hive. The stakes had escalated beyond survival. They had become a war for reality itself. Lyra shouted over the din, pointing to a weak point in the ritual, a channel where energy flowed from the symbols into a focal point. Spider-Man understood immediately. Using webs, scaffolding, and chains, he devised a way to disrupt the energy flow, tangling cultists, breaking conduits, and redirecting the psychic energy into a contained area. Sparks, smoke, and the sounds of tearing metal filled the courtyard, creating chaos that gave the civilians a chance to escape.
The ritual collapsed partially, but the warp's influence surged unpredictably. One cultist transformed violently, its body warping into a monstrous, multi-limbed creature that emitted a psychic scream. Spider-Man's reflexes were pushed to their limits as he dodged, countered, and redirected attacks, using the environment to protect both himself and the remaining civilians. Every move required split-second calculation, and failure meant immediate death. Amid the chaos, Peter noticed movement from above. Inquisition scouts, observing silently from high spires. Their armored forms were imposing, and the presence of these hunters reminded him that his actions were now under scrutiny from a far more dangerous authority. The Inquisition did not forgive recklessness. and their observation added another layer of tension, forcing Spider-Man to weigh each action carefully while continuing to fight and protect. The monstrous cultist charged, and Spider-Man responded with instinctive precision, webbing its limbs, swinging scaffolds into it, and luring it into a collapsing section of the building. It screamed, crashing through walls, leaving gouts of psychic energy that distorted reality in localized pockets. The courtyard was a battlefield of fire, smoke, twisted metal, and terrified civilians. Yet Peter moved with uncanny efficiency, a blur of red and blue weaving through chaos. Lyra and the Enclave joined the fray more directly, exploiting the creature's disorientation to attack weak points. Civilians were moved to safer zones, guided by Spider-Man's rapid instructions and webs that doubled as bridges or barriers. The synergy between the team became palpable, each member anticipating movements and threats instinctively. Spider-Man realized that leadership was now part of his role, not just heroism. He was the pivot around which the Resistance could operate effectively. The Hive itself seemed to respond to the battle, scaffolds groaning, machinery trembling, and smoke columns twisting unnaturally. Peter adapted instantly, using the city's motion to his advantage. Swinging webs to anchor points, redirecting falling debris, and improvising pathways, he transformed environmental hazards into tactical tools. Every risk was calculated, every maneuver designed to maximize efficiency against enemies who outnumbered and outpowered them in raw strength. The warp-touched entity attempted a psychic assault, its screen vibrating through Peter's mind. He felt an unfamiliar pressure in his skull, as if reality itself resisted him. Reacting instinctively, he created a web barrier, insulating a group of civilians from the psychic onslaught. The strain left him gasping, but it also reinforced his understanding. Survival here required not just agility and strength, but mental resilience, quick thinking, and adaptability. The Enclave coordinated a counterattack, distracting the remaining cultists, while Spider-Man focused on disrupting residual ritual energy. He used webs to isolate clusters of enemies, pulling them into traps made from scaffolds, chains, and molten pipes. Sparks flew, metal twisted, and the Hive's architecture became both battleground and weapon.
Civilians continued to escape in small, hurried groups, guided by Spider-Man's constant vigilance. As the final cultists were neutralized, the warp's influence began to dissipate in the courtyard, leaving behind charred ruins, twisted metal, and terrified survivors. Spider-Man took stock, breathing heavily, adrenaline still coursing. His webs were torn, armor scuffed, and muscles screaming from exertion. Yet he had succeeded. The Enclave members looked to him with a mixture of awe, gratitude, and newfound trust. The Inquisition scouts, still observing from above, did not intervene, but their presence lingered as a silent judgment. Peter felt the weight of being watched, understanding that his actions would have consequences beyond this battle. Every life saved here was a statement, every victory noticed, and he had to prepare for the eventual reckoning. Lyra led the survivors and Spider-Man to a temporary safe zone, hidden within the labyrinthine spires above the city. Peter observed the civilians quietly, noting the fear and exhaustion etched into every face. He realized that protection was an ongoing process, victory was temporary, and vigilance was endless. The Hive's darkness was persistent, but hope, however fragile, could survive with careful guidance and strategy. Exhausted but determined, Spider-Man reinforced defenses around the Enclave, using webs to create barriers, traps, and early warning systems. Every precaution mattered. The Hive did not forgive oversight. His mind raced with ideas for future improvements, integrating his web technology with the city's architecture, creating a network of protection that could operate even in his absence. The battle had changed something in him. He realized that heroism in the Hive required more than instinct and reflex. It required leadership, planning, and the ability to inspire others. He began training the Enclave in basic combat maneuvers, teaching web-based tactics and improvisational strategies that leveraged the city's verticality.
As night fell, Spider-Man perched on a high spire overlooking the city. Fires blazed in distant districts. Cultist activity persisted, and the Hive pulsed with the ever-present threat of chaos. Yet in the enclaves below, small pockets of safety had been created, and the civilians moved cautiously but with purpose. Hope, he realized, was contagious, and his presence was its catalyst. With dawn approaching, Spider-Man prepared for the next wave, knowing that more cultists, and eventually the Inquisition itself, would focus on him. He had survived impossible odds before, but the Hive demanded constant adaptation. Each day was a lesson, each battle a crucible, and he had to be ready for what lay ahead. With allies at his side, webs at the ready, and determination burning in his chest, Spider-Man leapt into the Hive's chaos once more, fully embracing his role as the web of faith. Spider-Man perched high above the Hive, the artificial night illuminated by a haze of red and orange fires that flickered through the twisting spires below. The distant roar of machinery reverberated through the scaffolds, mingling with the shouts of cultists and the cries of civilians caught in the relentless chaos. Tonight felt different, heavier, as if the city itself were holding its breath. His spider sense thrummed with tension, warning him of threats both visible and unseen, and he knew instinctively that the Inquisition had taken a direct interest in him. Lyra appeared silently beside him, her expression taut with caution. "They've marked you," she said quietly, her voice barely audible over the Hive's mechanical groans. "The Inquisition isn't just watching anymore. They're testing you, observing how you fight, how you protect civilians. One misstep, and they'll be your target." Spider-Man nodded grimly, the weight of her words pressing on him. He had faced impossible odds in New York, but this universe had rules of survival he had yet to fully understand. The city below was alive with movement, cultists swarming through marketplaces and alleys with a coordinated precision he hadn't seen before. Their chants resonated with psychic energy, warping reality in subtle but unsettling ways. Spider-Man swung down into the streets, landing atop a twisted scaffold, immediately scanning for civilians in danger. His movements were deliberate, every leap calculated, every web shot designed to protect those who could not protect themselves. Survival here was a balance of instinct and strategy. Civilians ran blindly through the streets, tripping over debris, screaming in panic as warp-touched cultists advanced. Spider-Man moved among them like a guardian spirit, webbing doors shut, pulling people to safety, and using falling scaffolds and molten pipes to disrupt enemy formations. Lyra and the Enclave worked in tandem, guiding the frightened citizens while keeping the cultists at bay.
Each action demanded focus, precision, and the ability to improvise under relentless pressure. A sudden psychic shockwave erupted from a cluster of cultists, knocking Spider-Man off a scaffold and sending him swinging violently through the air. He landed on a reinforced beam, chest heaving, adrenaline surging. The Hive was alive, a predator in its own right, responding unpredictably to the chaos. Each night was a new lesson in adaptation, a reminder that instinct alone would not ensure survival.
From above, a group of inquisitorial scouts observed silently, their ceramite armor gleaming faintly under the red haze. Peter felt their gaze pierce him, calculating, evaluating every movement. The Inquisition did not forgive mistakes, and their presence elevated the stakes beyond the immediate battle with the cultists. He had to protect civilians while simultaneously demonstrating enough skill and cunning to survive their scrutiny. Spider-Man assessed the battlefield, noting the cultists' positions and the civilians trapped in the open. His webs became more than weapons. They were tools for diversion, containment, and rapid evacuation. He improvised constantly, pulling down hanging debris to create barriers, redirecting molten streams to block enemy paths, and creating makeshift bridges to evacuate civilians. Every movement was a balance between offense, defense, and leadership. One warp-touched cultist lunged with elongated claws that sparked with energy. Spider-Man swung a chain from above, yanking the creature into a stack of crates that collapsed onto it, pinning it temporarily. Sparks and smoke filled the street as civilians ran past, guided by Lyra and the Enclave. He felt the thrill of improvisation, the raw satisfaction of survival, tempered by the knowledge that the Inquisition watched silently from above, their judgment looming over every action. The Hive itself seemed to respond to the chaos, groaning and shuddering as machinery shifted and smoke twisted unnaturally. Spider-Man adapted instantly, using the city's movement as both shield and weapon. He swung webs to anchor points, redirected falling debris, and created makeshift bridges to evacuate civilians. Each move required precise timing, and every decision carried life or death consequences. Civilians began whispering his name, the Web of Faith, as he guided them to safety. The title carried weight here, a fragile symbol of hope in a city ruled by fear and oppression. Spider-Man felt the burden of it, knowing that inspiration was a weapon as potent as webs or steel. Every life saved reinforced the network of trust he was building, and he realized that survival depended not only on combat skill, but also on leadership, empathy, and quick thinking. A particularly large group of cultists attempted to ambush the Enclave from multiple angles. Spider-Man responded with a series of web traps, swinging from above to entangle attackers while redirecting molten pipes into choke points. Lyra coordinated civilians and fighters, creating a defensive formation that maximized protection while minimizing casualties. The Hive had become a chessboard, and Spider-Man had learned to play with pieces both living and inert. Suddenly, a warp surge erupted near a collapsed scaffold, twisting reality in a small localized zone. Cultists and civilians alike were thrown off balance, screaming in confusion. Spider-Man reacted instinctively, using webs to stabilize falling debris, pulling civilians clear, and isolating warped-touched enemies with a combination of agility and clever use of the environment.
Each decision tested his physical endurance and mental acuity simultaneously. From the shadows, an Inquisitor descended silently, energy sword gleaming, observing Spider-Man's tactics with meticulous attention. Peter understood that his every move was being analyzed, judged, and remembered. One wrong swing, one miscalculated web, and he could face direct confrontation from the Inquisition, a fight he could not afford to lose. The city's chaos provided cover, but the scrutiny above reminded him that survival required both skill and prudence. Spider-Man launched a rapid series of attacks against a warp-touched cultist attempting to breach the Enclave's defenses. Webs entangled its limbs, scaffolds collapsed onto it, and molten pipes redirected its energy bursts into safe channels. He moved with the fluidity of instinct and the precision of calculation, blending superhero agility with the improvisational strategies he had developed since entering the Hive. Civilians were shielded, allies supported, and the battlefield gradually shifted in favor of the defenders. The Inquisitor's presence grew more pronounced, moving silently along scaffolds, observing Spider-Man's every action. Peter felt the weight of judgment pressing down, a cold reminder that his heroics were not merely acts of protection, but also a test of worthiness in this grim universe. He adjusted his tactics, ensuring civilians were safe while simultaneously demonstrating competence and strategy that could withstand the scrutiny of the Imperium's hunters. A sudden psychic scream tore through the courtyard as a warp-touched cultist exploded into unnatural energy. Spider-Man's spider sense flared violently, guiding him as he swung through falling debris, using webs to protect civilians from the shockwave and debris. Sparks flew, smoke thickened, and chaos reigned. Yet he moved with methodical precision, ensuring every life he could save remained unharmed. Lyra called out to him, directing a small group of survivors through a hidden passage. Spider-Man responded instantly, shooting webs to create bridges over molten floors and swinging debris to block pursuing cultists. Each action was a combination of instinct, calculation, and improvisation, showcasing the evolution of his combat and leadership skills within the Hive's unforgiving environment. The battle reached its climax as the cultists regrouped around a partially stabilized warp portal. Spider-Man recognized that this focal point had to be neutralized to prevent further corruption of the Hive. He improvised a complex web and debris trap, isolating the portal and the cultists surrounding it, while Lyra and the Enclave directed civilians to safety. Sparks, twisted metal, and psychic energy filled the courtyard, creating a chaotic but controlled battlefield. Spider-Man's agility and foresight allowed him to isolate key threats, redirect energy blasts, and contain warp-touched enemies using environmental hazards. Each move was deliberate, every web shot calculated to maximize protection and efficiency.
He felt the weight of responsibility acutely, knowing that a single lapse could result in devastation, not only for civilians, but also for the stability of the Hive itself. The Inquisitor moved closer, silent and imposing, watching Spider-Man's every action. Peter understood that their gaze was both a warning and a test. He could no longer act purely on instinct. Each decision had to demonstrate skill, intelligence, and restraint. Civilians remained the priority, yet he had to balance survival with tactical prudence, knowing that failure could mean immediate confrontation with the Imperium's most relentless enforcers. Using webs, scaffolds, and molten debris, Spider-Man isolated the remaining cultists, containing the warp influence while protecting civilians. Sparks and twisted metal flew, and the air buzzed with psychic tension. The hive itself seemed to pulse in response, almost aware of his interventions. Every move, every improvisation, every split-second decision had brought him closer to mastery within this alien, hostile city. As the last cultists fell or fled, Spider-Man surveyed the damage: scorched streets, twisted scaffolds, and terrified survivors. He breathed heavily, muscles screaming from exertion, yet the Enclave remained intact, civilians protected, and the immediate threat neutralized. The Inquisitor, still observing from a high scaffold, finally moved away, leaving Spider-Man to ponder the inevitable confrontation to come. Lyra led survivors and Spider-Man to a temporary sanctuary deep within the hive, where barricades, traps, and improvised defenses awaited. Peter took stock of the civilians, checking for injuries, calming fears, and organizing defensive measures. He realized that victory was always temporary, that the hive would demand constant vigilance and adaptation, and that hope was a fragile but vital resource. Exhausted but resolute, Spider-Man perched atop a high spire, looking over the city. Fires burned in distant districts. Cultist activity persisted, and the warp-tainted zones remained unpredictable. Yet the Enclave below had survived, and civilians had been protected. He felt the weight of his role as both protector and symbol, the web of faith, and understood that leadership required endurance, foresight, and unyielding courage. With dawn approaching, Spider-Man leapt into the hive's twisting spires once more, ready for whatever new threats emerged. The Inquisitor's attention would only grow. Cultist forces would continue to escalate, and the warp's influence would seep further into the city. Yet armed with webs, allies, and unwavering determination, he embraced the challenge. The hive had judged him, tested him, and for now he had survived. And though the darkness was relentless, Spider-Man would fight, protect, and adapt, one web at a time.
The hive shivered under the weight of an unnatural dawn, the red-tinged sky thick with smoke, ash, and the lingering glow of fires burning unchecked from the previous night. Spider-Man perched atop a jagged spire, surveying the city below with unease. Civilians moved cautiously, whispering of the web of faith who now swung through their streets, a symbol of hope amidst despair. But tonight, the city itself seemed restless, its machinery groaning and scaffolds trembling as if anticipating a cataclysm yet to come. The faint echo of marching boots carried through the air, chilling Peter's senses. Both cultists and the Inquisition were mobilizing, converging on his hidden enclave with terrifying coordination. Lyra joined him silently, her eyes scanning the horizon. "They've combined forces," she whispered, a rare tremor in her usually controlled voice. "The cults are growing desperate, and the Inquisition has decided to act directly. They want you, Spider-Man. Every move you make tonight will be watched, analyzed, and judged." Peter's jaw tightened. He had faced overwhelming odds before, but never like this.
Enemies not only in numbers but in organization, and forces that could strike with brutal efficiency from both the shadows and above. Below them, civilians clung to the narrow alleys and hidden courtyards, trusting Spider-Man to guide them safely. Every movement he made was deliberate, every web shot calculated to protect life while maximizing tactical advantage. The city's labyrinthine structure was both an obstacle and a weapon, and Peter had learned to wield it with precision, swinging through scaffolds, twisting conduits and rusted beams like extensions of his own body. The first wave of the assault erupted without warning. Warp-touched cultists poured into the enclave, their forms distorted, limbs elongated and crackling with unnatural energy. Spider-Man's reflexes kicked in instantly. Webs lashed out to ensnare attackers, scaffolds collapsed strategically to block paths, and molten pipes were redirected into choke points. Civilians screamed and scattered, guided by Lyra and the Enclave's fighters, while Peter moved with a fluidity that blurred the line between calculation and instinct. Above, inquisitorial scouts observed silently, their ceramitite armor glinting in the red haze. Peter could feel their scrutiny piercing him, every move weighed against their cold, precise judgment. One misstep, and their intervention would be swift and merciless. The realization tightened his chest. This battle was no longer just about survival. It was a test of skill, strategy, and moral fortitude.
He dove into the fray, swinging between scaffolds, his webs lashing with deadly accuracy, each strike calculated to incapacitate rather than kill, a necessity given the Inquisition's watchful eyes. Civilians were shepherded to temporary shelters, hidden within the twisted spires of the Hive, while Spider-Man and the Enclave fought to hold the line. Sparks flew, energy crackled, and the air smelled of smoke, ozone, and fear, thickening the oppressive atmosphere that hung over the city like a living weight. A warp-touched entity lunged from a collapsed wall, its psychic scream rattling Peter's mind. Instinctively, he fired webs to create a shield for a group of civilians and used scaffolding as leverage to swing around and strike the creature from behind. The attack was precise, brutal, and necessary. Each success reinforced the fragile hope that survival, however temporary, was possible. Yet every clash of limbs and webs reminded him of the stakes. The Hive was unforgiving, and mistakes would not be forgiven. Lyra coordinated from a distance, guiding civilians, signaling hidden fighters, and directing attention to weak points in the enemy formation. Spider-Man realized that her role was as vital as his own. Her knowledge of the Hive's labyrinthine corridors and hidden pathways gave them the edge they needed. Every move was a dance of improvisation, strategy, and raw skill, executed against a backdrop of chaos that would have unnerved even the most battle-hardened veteran. Suddenly, the Inquisition descended. Energy weapons hummed, ceramite armor glinting as they landed with the precision of hunters who had tracked their prey for days. Spider-Man felt a surge of adrenaline, recognizing the immediate threat. They were not here to negotiate. They were here to assess and, if necessary, eliminate. The calculus of his movements shifted. Protect civilians, neutralize cultists, survive inquisitorial scrutiny, all in real time with seconds to plan each decision. Spider-Man adapted his web techniques, creating defensive barriers and improvised traps that simultaneously hindered cultists and provided cover against inquisitorial fire. The Hive became a dynamic battlefield, a living weapon in his hands.
Every pipe, scaffold, and twisted beam was an extension of his strategy, a tool to manipulate the chaos around him while shielding the innocents below. His movements blurred, webs shooting in arcs that entangled enemies and created paths for civilians to escape. A warp surge rippled through the street, twisting the air and warping perception. Spider-Man's spider sense flared violently, warning him of sudden threats. He reacted instinctively, pulling civilians behind barricades, redirecting molten metal, and using webs to stabilize crumbling scaffolds. The assault intensified. Cultists, warp-touched monstrosities, and inquisitorial enforcers all converged in a storm of violence and psychic energy.
Spider-Man swung into a cluster of cultists, attempting to breach a barricade, entangling them in webs and pulling them into collapsing scaffolds. Sparks and twisted metal rained down as reality itself seemed to shudder around the warp influence. Civilians were guided through hidden corridors, their terrified faces illuminated by fire and psychic energy, trusting Spider-Man implicitly to lead them through a storm that would have shattered anyone else's resolve. Lyra shouted warnings, pointing out a cluster of cultists attempting a psychic ritual at a nearby plaza. Spider-Man responded immediately, swinging above them, shooting webs to disrupt the formation and redirecting molten pipes to destabilize their focus. Every move required split-second calculation, balancing the immediate threat against long-term safety for both civilians and allies. The Hive pulsed with chaotic energy, amplifying the intensity of every encounter. An Inquisitor approached from above, energy blade poised, moving silently but with lethal intent. Spider-Man recognized that direct combat with them would be dangerous, and every action had to demonstrate competence while avoiding unnecessary provocation. He adapted, using webs and environmental hazards to block lines of sight, create distractions, and maintain the initiative without attracting lethal attention. A warp-touched cultist exploded near a barricade, sending psychic shockwaves that threw Spider-Man off balance. He swung around debris, firing webs to stabilize falling scaffolds and protect fleeing civilians. The Hive fought with precision, inspired by his actions, forming a coordinated effort that combined experience, ingenuity, and sheer willpower against overwhelming forces. Spider-Man noticed civilians trapped behind a collapsed section of scaffolding. Without hesitation, he swung down, using webs to create a bridge and pulling them to safety. Simultaneously, he fired webs to entangle attacking cultists, redirecting molten streams and collapsing debris to hold them back. Each action was a calculated improvisation, a blend of instinct and strategic thinking that had become second nature. The Inquisitor's scrutiny became more pronounced, moving closer to assess Spider-Man's tactics. Peter adjusted his movements, ensuring efficiency, precision, and civilian safety. He understood that the slightest misstep could lead to confrontation or censure. Every web shot, every maneuver had to demonstrate skill, intelligence, and restraint while maintaining the momentum of the battle. Cultists attempted a flanking maneuver through hidden alleys. Spider-Man anticipated the movement, swinging through vertical conduits to intercept, using webs to block the paths and redirect energy attacks. Lyra and the Enclave exploited the disruption, isolating the enemies and neutralizing threats before they could reach the civilians. The Hive itself seemed to bend to Spider-Man's improvisational mastery, each scaffold and pipe serving as an instrument of both defense and offense. And warp-touched entity surged through the battlefield, its psychic presence warping reality around it. Spider-Man's spider sense flared violently as he coordinated with Lyra, using webs and environmental hazards to contain the creature while shielding civilians. Sparks flew, debris twisted, and the city itself became a weapon in his hands, reinforcing the fragile hope that survival was possible even in the Hive's relentless darkness. As the battle intensified, Spider-Man realized that leadership was as crucial as combat skill. He directed civilians, coordinated attacks with Lyra and the Enclave, and used the environment strategically to maximize efficiency. Every decision carried weight, every action had consequences, and the relentless pressure of the Hive honed his instincts to razor-sharp precision. The combined assault reached its peak as cultists, warp energy, and inquisitorial forces converged in a central plaza. Spider-Man moved fluidly through the chaos, webs ensnaring enemies, debris redirected as barriers, and civilians guided through improvised escape routes. Sparks, smoke, and psychic energy filled the air, creating a battlefield of unrelenting intensity. Lyra led a coordinated effort to evacuate the most vulnerable civilians, while Spider-Man focused on neutralizing immediate threats and protecting choke points. The Hive pulsed violently, scaffolds creaking, machinery groaning, as if reacting to the concentrated conflict. Every move demanded focus, speed, and adaptability, testing Spider-Man's physical and mental limits simultaneously. A warp surge threatened to destabilize the entire plaza. Spider-Man reacted instinctively, swinging webs to anchor collapsing beams and redirecting energy streams into containment zones. Civilians were shielded, cultists disrupted, and the battlefield slowly shifted in favor of the defenders. Every improvisation, every risk had contributed to a fragile, temporary victory. As the last cultists and warp-touched entities were neutralized, Spider-Man surveyed the devastation: scorched streets, twisted scaffolds, and exhausted survivors. The Inquisitor remained, observing from a distant spire, their presence a silent reminder that the Hive's judgment was ongoing and that future confrontations would escalate further. Spider-Man felt the weight of his role: protector, symbol, and tactician in a city where failure was not an option. With dawn approaching, Spider-Man leapt from the central plaza, swinging through the Hive's towering spires once more. The city was scarred, but still alive, civilians safe for now, and enemies scattered or neutralized. The combined threat of the Inquisition and chaos had tested him to his limits, but he had survived. Determination burned in his chest, and he embraced his role fully. The web of faith, swinging through shadows, protecting the innocent, and ready to face whatever the Hive would throw at him next.
The Hive lay in ruin, beneath a sky smeared with red and black, the fires of the previous night still smoldering, casting grotesque shadows across twisted scaffolds and shattered streets. Spider-Man perched atop a shattered spire, surveying the devastation. Civilians emerged cautiously, wary and exhausted, whispering of the web of faith, whose presence had become both legend and hope. But the city itself seemed tainted, alive with a malignancy that seeped through the metal and stone, pulsating with an unnatural rhythm that twisted the senses. Lyra joined him silently, her gaze scanning the horizon with unspoken urgency. "It's worse than we thought," she murmured. "The cults aren't acting alone. Someone is orchestrating this, a master of warp corruption. Every assault, every ritual has led us here, to the core of the Hive's heart. If we fail, the entire district could fall under warp influence permanently." Spider-Man's jaw tightened. He had faced impossible odds before, but now the stakes were existential, the survival of the Hive itself. They moved cautiously through the upper levels, using the shattered scaffolds as vantage points. Spider-Man's spider sense flared constantly, warning him of hidden traps, warp-tainted creatures, and inquisitorial scouts. The Hive had become a living weapon, Every creaking beam, every shifting pipe, a potential hazard or advantage. Survival demanded instinct, ingenuity, and precision, all honed under the constant threat of chaos and judgment. Below them, civilians huddled in makeshift shelters, their eyes wide with fear and hope. Spider-Man swung down, guiding them through safe corridors, creating webs that doubled as bridges and shields. The Enclave followed his lead, demonstrating remarkable coordination, a testament to the trust he had built. Every life saved was a victory, however fleeting, in a city designed to crush hope. Suddenly, a massive psychic shockwave erupted from a distant section of the Hive, warping reality in its path. Warp-touched cultists surged forward, their forms twisted and monstrous. Spider-Man reacted instantly, swinging into action, lashing webs to contain the creatures while redirecting molten pipes into choke points. Civilians screamed, scattering under Lyra's direction, as the Hive itself seemed to pulse with malignant intent. Spider-Man assessed the battlefield, noting that cultist movements were coordinated with precision far beyond normal fanaticism. Someone, or something, was directing them, a mind that saw multiple moves ahead, manipulating warp energy like a conductor orchestrating a symphony of destruction. He realized that reaching the source of this corruption would require not just strength and agility, but strategy, foresight, and careful planning.
The first major confrontation occurred at a central junction where cultists attempted to open a warp rift that threatened to engulf the district. Spider-Man swung into the fray, firing webs to entangle attackers, redirecting molten debris to disrupt formations, and using the city's scaffolds to his advantage. The Enclave coordinated perfectly, creating a human web network that protected civilians while isolating enemies. Sparks, twisted metal, and psychic energy filled the air, a chaotic tableau of violence and heroism. Lyra pointed out the key focus of the ritual, a glowing, pulsating obelisk surrounded by warp energy and guarded by monstrous entities. Spider-Man understood immediately. Neutralizing this obelisk would destabilize the cultists' power and prevent further corruption. He began improvising a complex web-based containment system, using scaffolds, chains, and molten metal to isolate the obelisk while redirecting psychic energy away from civilians. A warp-touched monstrosity lunged from the shadows, its form grotesque, limbs elongated, energy crackling across jagged edges. Spider-Man reacted instinctively, swinging webs around its limbs, yanking it into a collapsing scaffold and redirecting molten pipes to trap it temporarily. Every movement demanded precision and timing, and every second mattered. Civilians were guided to safety, their terrified faces illuminated by fire and psychic glow. From above, inquisitorial scouts observed silently, their armored forms imposing in the dim red haze. Spider-Man understood that their scrutiny added a new layer of tension. His actions had to balance offensive effectiveness, civilian protection, and tactical restraint to avoid provoking direct intervention. He adapted instantly, using webs, environmental hazards, and misdirection to maintain both safety and strategy under observation. The battle escalated as multiple warp-touched cultists converged on the obelisk, their psychic energy distorting the air. Spider-Man swung with fluid precision, entangling attackers in webs while using scaffolds and chains to isolate them. Sparks flew, metal twisted, and the Hive seemed to respond to the concentration of violence, shaking and groaning as if alive. Civilians moved under Lyra's guidance, fleeing through improvised routes while Spider-Man protected every path.
A sudden psychic pulse erupted from the obelisk, knocking Spider-Man off a scaffold and sending debris hurtling past him. He swung instinctively, redirecting molten streams and using webs to stabilize falling beams.
The Hive had become a battlefield, a living maze, and every misstep could mean death. Yet he adapted instantly, improvising and anticipating each new threat with razor-sharp precision. Lyra coordinated with Spider-Man, pointing out weak points in the enemy formation and suggesting tactical maneuvers. Spider-Man fired webs, collapsing scaffolds strategically and redirecting molten energy streams into choke points. The combined effort of allies and improvisation slowly shifted the battlefield in their favor, even as warp energy pulsed violently around the obelisk. The Hive seemed to resist, scaffolds groaning, machinery trembling, and shadows twisting unnaturally. Spider-Man adapted, turning the environment into a weapon, using webs to control the battlefield, creating barriers, bridges, and traps on the fly. Every second was a test of agility, strategy, and mental endurance as he battled both warp-touched enemies and the oppressive atmosphere of the Hive itself. From the shadows, a new threat emerged, a chaos sorcerer cloaked in twisting energy, manipulating the warp with terrifying precision. Spider-Man recognized immediately that this was the true mastermind orchestrating the Hive's corruption. The sorcerer's presence radiated power, warping reality in localized zones and commanding cultists with deadly efficiency. Every move against him would be a trial of skill, strategy, and nerve. Spider-Man swung into action, using webs to disrupt the sorcerer's control over the cultists while simultaneously protecting civilians and allies. Sparks flew, beams twisted, and psychic energy crackled through the Hive as he improvised, using scaffolds and molten metal to counter the sorcerer's influence. Each maneuver demanded perfect timing, precision, and adaptability. The sorcerer unleashed a concentrated warp attack, twisting reality around Spider-Man and creating temporary illusions that threatened to confuse and trap him. Spider-Man's spider sense flared violently, guiding him through the distortions. He swung with fluid agility, directing webs and environmental hazards with pinpoint accuracy, keeping civilians safe while systematically neutralizing cultist threats. Lyra and the Enclave focused on evacuating civilians, using improvised signals, safe paths, and barricades to minimize casualties. Spider-Man coordinated their movements, integrating their efforts into a cohesive defense, while simultaneously engaging the sorcerer and his warp-touched minions. Sparks, twisted metal, and psychic energy filled the battlefield, creating a chaotic symphony of destruction and heroism.
Spider-Man identified a weak point in the sorcerer's concentration, a focal node where warp energy flowed most intensely. He devised an audacious plan, using webs, scaffolds, and molten metal to isolate and disrupt the energy flow. Every movement required perfect timing, anticipation of enemy reactions, and a willingness to risk exposure to save lives and destabilize the mastermind's power. The plan executed flawlessly, though with near-catastrophic risks. The obelisk's energy destabilized, cultists faltered, and the sorcerer's control wavered. Sparks and psychic energy exploded around Spider-Man, yet he remained focused, guiding civilians to safety while neutralizing remaining threats. The Hive groaned, machinery shaking, but the immediate threat was contained. Exhausted but resolute, Spider-Man surveyed the battlefield. Civilians were safe for now. Cultist forces scattered or neutralized, and the warp's influence in the immediate area weakened. The sorcerer, however, had escaped, leaving a lingering threat and a promise of future confrontation. Spider-Man realized that the Hive's struggle was far from over, and the war for its heart had only begun. Lyra approached, her expression a mixture of relief and concern. "We've bought time," she said, "but the mastermind will return, and the Hive will be scarred further. You've shown them what we're capable of, but you've also marked yourself. The Inquisition will take notice, and Chaos will not forgive your interference." Spider-Man nodded, understanding the weight of her words. Survival was temporary, vigilance eternal. Spider-Man began reinforcing safe zones within the Hive, using webs to create barriers, traps, and early warning systems. Civilians were organized into shelters, evacuation routes marked, and the Enclave trained to respond rapidly to future threats. Every measure was designed to maintain hope, resilience, and protection in a city dominated by chaos and oppression. As night fell, Spider-Man perched atop a high spire, looking down at the Hive's labyrinthine streets. Fires burned, cultist activity lingered, and the oppressive presence of the warp seemed to pulse through the city. Yet civilians survived, allies endured, and the immediate threat was neutralized. Hope, fragile but persistent, remained. With dawn approaching, Spider-Man swung through the Hive's towering spires once more, fully aware that the true battle was far from over. The Chaos Mastermind had revealed himself, the Inquisition's attention loomed, and the city remained perilously unstable. Armed with webs, allies, and unwavering determination, Spider-Man embraced his role as the Web of Faith, a guardian, strategist, and symbol of hope, ready to face the relentless darkness of the Hive.
The Hive quaked, as if it sensed the approach of something far greater than itself. Fires burned across distant spires, smoke curling into the crimson sky like the claws of a phantom. Spider-Man perched atop a jagged scaffold, the scent of molten metal and scorched steel thick in the air. Civilians peered from the shadows of ruined streets, their faces reflecting both fear and fragile hope. The Web of Faith had become their symbol, their protector, but tonight he would face the true source of the chaos that had engulfed their city. Lyra joined him silently, her expression taut with concern. "He's here," she whispered, "the mastermind, not just a sorcerer, but something born of the warp itself, feeding on the Hive's corruption. Every cultist, every warp-touched abomination is drawn to him. If he consolidates power, the entire district will fall." Spider-Man's jaw tightened. He had faced overwhelming odds before, but nothing like this. A being that warped reality and commanded a city's chaos as easily as breathing. The streets below swarmed with warp-touched cultists, organized and relentless. Spider-Man swung into action immediately, lashing webs to contain attackers while redirecting molten streams into choke points. Civilians ran, guided by Lyra and the Enclave, moving through carefully improvised escape routes. Every movement, every web shot was a calculation. Protect the innocent, neutralize threats, and preserve the initiative. Sparks flew as a massive warp-touched entity lunged at him, its limbs twisted and crackling with energy. Spider-Man dodged with instinctive fluidity, using scaffolds and chains to redirect the creature's path. He webbed its claws to immobilize it temporarily, redirecting molten pipes into its path. Each action required split-second precision, balancing offense, defense, and civilian safety in a battlefield that shifted by the second. From above, inquisitorial scouts observed silently, their ceramite armor glinting under the red haze.
Spider-Man understood their scrutiny was absolute. Any misstep would invite lethal judgment. He adapted immediately, ensuring his moves were effective yet disciplined, striking a careful balance between improvisation and tactical restraint. Survival demanded both skill and foresight. Spider-Man swung across the scaffolds, landing in the midst of a group of cultists performing a small-scale warp ritual. Webs shot from his hands with pinpoint accuracy, entangling attackers and disrupting the ritual. Sparks and twisted metal flew, as the hive itself seemed to respond to the concentrated psychic energy, shaking and groaning in protest. Civilians were guided safely away through hidden corridors, their trust in him absolute.
A massive shockwave erupted from the direction of the central spire, the seat of the Chaos Mastermind. Reality warped in localized pockets, twisting the streets and buildings into grotesque forms. Spider-Man's spider sense flared violently, guiding him through the distortions as he used webs to stabilize debris and protect fleeing civilians. Every action required mental focus as sharp as his physical agility. Lyra directed survivors with precision, signaling them towards safe zones and improvising barriers against advancing cultists. Spider-Man coordinated with her in real time, using webs to manipulate the battlefield, isolate enemies, and create safe passageways. Sparks, molten metal, and psychic energy illuminated the hive in a nightmarish dance of destruction and salvation. The Chaos Mastermind revealed himself at the central spire, a towering figure wreathed in warp energy, eyes glowing with unnatural intelligence. Spider-Man froze for a fraction of a second, measuring the presence of power, but immediately swung into action. He could not falter. The lives of hundreds depended on his agility, strategy, and determination. The Mastermind's psychic influence radiated outward, warping reality, bending cultists to his will, and sending environmental hazards spinning unpredictably. Spider-Man swung into the fray, lashing webs to contain attackers, redirecting molten metal, and collapsing scaffolds into carefully chosen zones to isolate enemies. Civilians ran through improvised paths, guided by Lyra's signals, while Spider-Man fought on multiple fronts simultaneously. The first direct attack came as a warp surge, twisting the air and disorienting nearby structures. Spider-Man's spider sense guided him as he swung through falling debris, protecting civilians and allies while using webs to counter the surge's destructive effects. Sparks flew, beams twisted, and the hive seemed alive, responding dynamically to the battle around it. Spider-Man identified a weak point in the Mastermind's control over the cultists, a network of psychic nodes hidden within the hive's infrastructure. Swinging across scaffolds with fluid precision, he began severing these nodes with webs, collapsing critical conduits, and isolating clusters of enemies. Each move required perfect timing, anticipating both the Mastermind's reactions and the unpredictable warp distortions. Civilians were guided through safe corridors, the Enclave working seamlessly under Spider-Man's direction. Webs became both weapon and shield, creating barriers, bridges, and traps on the fly. Sparks, twisted metal, and psychic energy erupted around him, yet he remained focused, a calm eye in the storm of chaos. The Chaos Mastermind struck directly, sending a concentrated warp blast towards Spider-Man. He swung with instinctive speed, redirecting molten streams and using webs to shield nearby civilians. The blast collided with scaffolds, sending debris flying, yet Spider-Man emerged unscathed, landing amidst a group of cultists to entangle and neutralize them.
The inquisitorial observers descended, their presence imposing and precise. Energy blades hummed as they moved to assess Spider-Man's tactics. He adapted instantly, demonstrating efficiency and control, avoiding unnecessary confrontation while simultaneously keeping civilians safe and cultists at bay. His improvisation had evolved into strategic mastery.
Spider-Man launched a coordinated assault on a cluster of warp-touched cultists, attempting to reinforce the mastermind. Webs ensnared limbs, molten streams redirected attacks, and scaffolds collapsed strategically to block movements. Civilians were shepherded through protected paths, their safety a constant priority. Every action was a balance of heroism, strategy, and improvisation. A psychic pulse from the mastermind distorted reality around Spider-Man, creating illusions and multiple perceived threats. Spider-Man relied on instinct and spider sense, swinging fluidly to distinguish reality from warp manipulation, targeting real threats while maintaining civilian protection. Sparks flew, debris twisted, and the Hive itself seemed to pulse with energy in response to the confrontation. Lyra signaled a hidden route toward the central spire. Spider-Man coordinated with her, using webs to clear obstacles, create bridges, and isolate enemies. Every movement was precise, deliberate, and executed with split-second timing. Sparks, molten metal, and psychic distortions filled the Hive, yet Spider-Man navigated it with unmatched agility and strategic thinking. Spider-Man reached the base of the central spire, facing the Chaos Mastermind directly. The air vibrated with psychic energy, scaffolds twisted, and the Hive's machinery groaned under the warp's influence. Spider-Man swung webs to create barriers and improvised traps, buying time for civilians and Enclave fighters to regroup and evacuate. The Mastermind unleashed a torrent of warp energy, warping the environment and summoning monstrous minions. Spider-Man reacted instantly, lashing webs to isolate enemies, redirecting molten flows, and using debris as shields and projectiles. Civilians were moved through hidden passages, while Lyra and the Enclave focused on neutralizing weaker threats, their coordination a testament to Spider-Man's leadership. A massive collision erupted as Spider-Man redirected a warp blast into collapsing scaffolds, sending cultists tumbling into containment zones. Sparks and twisted metal filled the air, yet he moved with fluid precision, swinging from vantage point to vantage point, maintaining the initiative while protecting civilians. Every maneuver tested his agility, endurance, and mental acuity. The Inquisitors approached the central spire cautiously, observing Spider-Man's actions. He understood their presence was both evaluation and threat, and adapted his tactics to demonstrate skill, intelligence, and restraint. His movements became a balance of improvisation and strategy, ensuring survival while maintaining authority over the battlefield.
Spider-Man identified a final weak point in the warp network, feeding the Mastermind's power. Using webs, molten metal, and scaffolds, he isolated and disrupted the node, destabilizing the flow of energy. The Chaos Mastermind faltered, its control over cultists wavering. Sparks, psychic energy, and debris filled the Hive, yet Spider-Man remained focused, protecting civilians while exploiting the opening. With the warp network destabilized, Spider-Man and the Enclave launched a final coordinated strike, neutralizing remaining cultists and forcing the Mastermind into retreat. Civilians were safe, the Hive scarred but intact, and the immediate threat contained. Exhaustion washed over him, yet the sense of victory, however temporary, was palpable. Spider-Man perched atop the central spire as dawn approached, surveying the battered Hive. Fires still burned. The Inquisition observed silently, and the Chaos Mastermind had vanished, leaving only promises of future confrontation. Civilians survived, allies endured, and the city remained alive. Armed with webs, strategy, and unwavering determination, Spider-Man embraced his role fully, the web of faith, guardian of the Hive, ready for the darkness yet to come.
The Hive trembled, as if aware of the final confrontation. Fires burned across the district, smoke swirling into a crimson dawn that stretched like a wound across the sky. Spider-Man perched atop a towering scaffold, surveying the sprawling battlefield below. Civilians huddled in makeshift shelters, eyes wide with fear and hope. Every street, every corridor, and every spire had become a potential battlefield, a trap, or a sanctuary. Tonight, the Hive would decide whether survival was possible or merely a memory. Lyra appeared beside him, her expression taut with determination. "This is it," she said. "The Chaos Mastermind is consolidating his power, and the Inquisition will strike simultaneously. They intend to crush the Hive entirely, and you. Every move we make must be precise, every life protected, every threat neutralized. If we fail, there will be no second chance." Spider-Man nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility press against his chest. The fate of hundreds, perhaps thousands, rested on his shoulders. The streets below erupted with chaos. As warp-touched cultists surged outward, their forms grotesque, limbs crackling with psychic energy. Spider-Man swung into action, firing webs to entangle attackers, redirecting molten pipes into choke points, and guiding civilians along improvised escape routes. Sparks flew, scaffolds collapsed strategically, and the air trembled with psychic energy and war cries. From above, inquisitorial forces descended, armored figures moving with relentless precision. Energy blades hummed and bolters roared, as Spider-Man adapted instantly, balancing offense and defense. He had to protect civilians, neutralize cultists, and survive the scrutiny and potential intervention of the Inquisition simultaneously. Every second was a test of skill, strategy, and nerve. The Chaos Mastermind emerged atop the central spire, wreathed in warp energy that twisted reality around him. Spider-Man's spider sense flared violently, alerting him to the distorted gravity, psychic pulses, and latent warp traps that rippled through the spire. Civilians were guided to safety, Lyra and the Enclave working in perfect coordination. The Hive itself seemed to resist, scaffolds groaning, machinery shaking, as if protesting the concentrated energy. Spider-Man swung into the fray, webs lashing to immobilize cultists, redirecting molten metal into containment zones, and collapsing scaffolds strategically to block enemy reinforcements. Every move had to be calculated. One mistake could expose civilians or create an opening for the mastermind.
Sparks, debris, and psychic energy illuminated the battlefield in a chaotic ballet of destruction. A warp-touched monstrosity lunged at him, its limbs elongated and sparking with energy. Spider-Man reacted instinctively, swinging through debris, anchoring webs to stabilize the collapsing scaffolds, and redirecting molten streams into the creature's path. The Hive was alive and hostile, a shifting labyrinth of hazards that tested his agility and instincts to the limit. Lyra directed civilians toward hidden shelters, signaling the Enclave to form defensive perimeters. Spider-Man coordinated their movements, using webs to shield paths, create bridges, and isolate enemies. Every action was both defensive and offensive, blending heroism with strategy as he navigated the Hive's twisting corridors and treacherous scaffolds. The Chaos Mastermind unleashed a psychic wave, warping reality and summoning monstrous minions. Spider-Man swung with fluid precision, using webs to redirect attacks, entangle enemies, and protect civilians. Sparks, molten metal, and psychic energy filled the Hive, creating a battlefield of unrelenting intensity. Every second demanded mental focus as sharp as physical agility. Inquisitors advanced cautiously, their ceramite armor glinting under the red haze.
Spider-Man understood that they were both evaluators and potential threats. He adapted his tactics, demonstrating skill and discipline while maintaining the initiative. His webs created barriers, traps, and improvisational defenses, keeping civilians safe while isolating enemies. Spider-Man identified weak points in the Mastermind's warp nodes, the conduits channeling psychic energy through the Hive. Swinging with precise timing, he used webs, molten debris, and scaffolds to sever nodes, isolate cultists, and destabilize the energy flow. Sparks and psychic surges filled the air, yet he remained focused, each movement a calculated improvisation in the chaos. Civilians were evacuated through hidden routes, guided by Lyra's signaling. Spider-Man coordinated their movement with strategic precision, ensuring that no one was left behind. Every corridor, scaffold, and alley became a controlled element of the battlefield, manipulated to protect life while neutralizing threats. The Chaos Mastermind struck directly, sending concentrated warp blasts at Spider-Man. He dodged instinctively, swinging across scaffolds, redirecting molten streams, and using webs as shields. Every movement required split-second calculation, balancing civilian protection, enemy neutralization, and environmental hazards simultaneously. The Hive groaned under the pressure, scaffolds twisting, machinery shuttering, and shadows warping unnaturally. Spider-Man adapted, using webs to stabilize debris, redirect molten flows, and create controlled traps for enemies. Sparks and psychic energy lit the twisted streets as the Hive itself became a participant in the battle.
Lyra signaled a critical evacuation path to the central spire. Spider-Man coordinated with her, using webs to clear debris, anchor collapsing beams, and guide civilians safely. Every second counted. The slightest hesitation could result in catastrophe. Sparks, twisted metal, and warp energy filled the air, yet he moved with fluid precision, blending heroism, strategy, and instinct. Spider-Man engaged a cluster of warp-touched cultists attempting to reinforce the Mastermind. Webs ensnared limbs, molten metal redirected attacks, and scaffolds collapsed strategically to isolate threats. Civilians were shepherded along protected paths, their safety a constant priority. Every action tested his agility, endurance, and tactical acuity. The Chaos Masterminds summoned a warp surge, creating localized distortions that threatened to collapse scaffolds and disorient civilians. Spider-Man reacted instantly, swinging through the shifting environment, redirecting molten streams, and using webs to stabilize structures. Every move was precise, every decision critical to survival and protection. Inquisitors advanced toward the central spire, observing Spider-Man's movements. He adapted, demonstrating control, efficiency, and tactical awareness. His webs became weapons, shields, and tools for improvisation, creating a balance between offense, defense, and civilian protection under the eyes of the Imperium. Spider-Man identified the Mastermind's final node of warp energy, a focal point powering the Hive-wide corruption. He devised a daring plan, using webs, molten metal, and scaffolds to isolate and disrupt the node while simultaneously defending civilians. Sparks and psychic energy erupted around him as the Hive trembled under the combined assault. The final confrontation erupted. Spider-Man swung through collapsing scaffolds, firing webs with precision to entangle minions and redirect energy attacks. Civilians moved through carefully constructed safe routes, guided by Lyra and the Enclave. Sparks, molten debris, and warp distortions filled the air, creating a chaotic battlefield that tested his every skill. Spider-Man isolated the Mastermind's node, severing its energy flow with webs and environmental manipulation. The warp influence destabilized, cultists faltered, and the Hive itself groaned as if releasing a held breath. Sparks, psychic energy, and twisted metal filled the scene. Yet Spider-Man remained focused, protecting civilians while exploiting the disruption. The Chaos Mastermind faltered, its control over cultists weakening. Spider-Man used the opening to neutralize remaining enemies, directing the Enclave to secure critical areas and evacuate civilians. The Hive, scarred and smoking, began to stabilize, its deadly labyrinth slowly yielding to control and order. Exhausted but resolute, Spider-Man surveyed the battlefield. Fires still burned, the Inquisition observed silently, and the Chaos Mastermind had been forced to retreat. Civilians survived, the Enclave endured, and the Hive remained alive. Hope, fragile but persistent, had survived the onslaught. Lyra approached, her expression a mixture of relief and exhaustion. "You've done it. The Hive is safe. For now. But you've marked yourself. The Inquisition knows your skill, and Chaos will not forget. The war isn't over, but tonight we've won a hard-fought victory." Spider-Man nodded, knowing her words were true. Survival was temporary. Vigilance would be eternal.
With dawn breaking fully across the Hive, Spider-Man perched atop the central spire, looking over the battered city. Fires burned in distant districts, cultist activity lingered, and the Inquisition watched from afar. Yet civilians survived, allies endured, and the Hive remained standing. Armed with webs, skill, and unwavering determination, Spider-Man embraced his role as the web of faith, guardian, strategist, and symbol of hope in a city forged by chaos and adversity.
The Hive lay in silence, a fragile calm settling over streets still scarred by fire, debris, and the remnants of warp-touched corruption. Spider-Man perched atop a high spire, surveying the labyrinthine city below. Smoke spiraled into the dawn sky, casting long shadows across the twisted scaffolds. Civilians emerged cautiously, their faces a mixture of relief and lingering fear. The web of faith had endured, and the Hive still breathed, though its wounds were deep and raw. Lyra joined him, her gaze scanning the streets. "The immediate threat is gone," she said softly. "The cultists have scattered, the warp influence has been contained, and the Inquisition has withdrawn, for now. But the Hive is fragile, and its people are weary. You've done more than fight. You've given them hope." Spider-Man nodded, feeling the weight of her words. Hope was a fragile thread in a city built on metal, fire, and despair, but sometimes it was enough. He swung down from the spire, landing amid rubble-strewn streets. Civilians stared, their whispers carried by the wind. Some bowed, some cheered. Others simply stared in awe at the figure who had fought impossible odds and survived. Spider-Man waved subtly, a silent acknowledgement of their trust and faith. Every life saved was a victory, every act of courage a testament to the resilience of the Hive. The Enclave worked tirelessly, reinforcing structures, clearing debris, and stabilizing weakened scaffolds. Spider-Man assisted, his webs providing both scaffolding support and bridges for workers and evacuees. Sparks and molten metal still smoldered, but the hive slowly began to feel alive again, its heartbeat steadier after the night of chaos and destruction. Lyra approached a section where warp residue still lingered, glowing faintly along broken conduits. "This contamination isn't fully gone," she said, concern etched on her face. "It could take weeks, maybe months to cleanse it completely, and even then, some areas may never recover." Spider-Man nodded, understanding that the battle was won, but the war against chaos was never truly over.
Children cautiously stepped from shelters, watching Spider-Man move among the rubble. He knelt briefly, offering a reassuring smile. "You're safe," he said, "for now. But remember, the Hive is stronger than its darkest night, and so are you." Their eyes reflected trust, innocence, and a hint of wonder. In that moment, Spider-Man realized that heroism was as much about inspiring hope as it was about fighting enemies. Civilians began to rebuild, improvising shelters and repairing scaffolds. Spider-Man's webs became tools of construction, stabilizing structures and creating safer routes. Sparks and molten debris were carefully redirected, preventing further accidents. The Hive was healing, and Spider-Man moved among its people as both protector and guide. Lyra coordinated with Enclave leaders, discussing long-term strategies for defense, evacuation, and recovery. Spider-Man listened, contributing insights from his experiences, helping to design early warning systems and contingency plans. The city's survival depended not just on strength, but on organization, foresight, and unity. Above, the sky began to lighten, casting a pale glow over the Hive. Spider-Man perched atop a scaffold, watching his light touch the twisted streets. Fires still burned, shadows lingered, but the city endured. The web of faith had prevailed, a symbol of hope and resilience in a world dominated by darkness and chaos. Lyra approached him again. "You've done more than survive," she said. "You've inspired people, shown them that even in the heart of corruption, courage can endure. But the Inquisition will remember your actions, and chaos will not forgive. You've made enemies on both sides." Spider-Man's jaw tightened. He understood that the peace was temporary, fragile, and contingent on vigilance. Spider-Man descended into the central plaza, where civilians had begun gathering in cautious celebration. Some brought gifts of gratitude, small food items, water, makeshift banners, while others simply offered quiet thanks. Spider-Man moved among them, helping to clear rubble, stabilizing scaffolds, and reinforcing weakened streets with webs. Every action reinforced hope, turning survival into resilience. The Enclave worked tirelessly, using the lessons of the previous battles to train civilians in basic defense, evacuation, and coordination. Spider-Man guided them, demonstrating web-based tools for reinforcement, movement, and protection. The Hive, scarred but alive, became stronger for its trials, each citizen a node in a network of survival. From the shadows, remnants of cultists stirred, but Spider-Man's vigilance kept them at bay. He used webs to secure perimeters, create barriers, and monitor critical areas. Sparks, molten nickel, and twisted debris were carefully controlled, turning hazards into defensive tools. The Hive's survival depended on constant awareness and adaptability.
Lyra examined the last remnants of warp contamination, carefully purging corrupted energy nodes. Spider-Man assisted, anchoring scaffolds, stabilizing molten conduits, and redirecting residual energy.
The process was painstaking, slow, but essential. Each node cleansed was a victory, a restoration of the hive's integrity. Civilians moved cautiously through newly stabilized streets, their trust in Spider-Man growing. Children played amid safe zones, elders observed reconstruction efforts, and the Enclave coordinated logistics with precision. The city was scarred, but it was alive, and its heartbeat was steady. Spider-Man patrolled the outer districts, checking perimeters, monitoring for latent warp activity, and reinforcing vulnerable areas. Every web, every scaffold, and every controlled molten flow was both a tool of survival and a symbol of vigilance. The Hive had survived the worst, but the memory of chaos lingered, a reminder of the dangers yet to come. As night fell, the Hive settled into a wary calm. Fires had mostly died, shadows lengthened, and the air was thick with the smell of metal, smoke, and renewal. Spider-Man perched atop a high spire, looking down at streets filled with quiet determination. Civilians moved cautiously, yet the hope in their eyes reflected resilience stronger than fear. Lyra approached, her expression contemplative. "You've given them a chance," she said, "a chance to rebuild, to survive, to endure. But remember, the Hive will always be a battleground between chaos, the Inquisition, and those who live here. Your role, it's far from over." Spider-Man nodded, fully aware that vigilance was eternal, and heroism required more than just strength. Spider-Man descended into a quiet courtyard where children had gathered around small fires and telling stories of survival. He knelt, listening, offering reassurance, and reminding them that courage and hope were powerful tools, often stronger than weapons or webs. Their laughter, fragile yet determined, echoed through the ruins, a melody of renewal. The Enclave coordinated efforts to reinforce infrastructure, create safe zones, and monitor residual warp activity. Spider-Man assisted, using webs to stabilize weakened structures, create bridges across damaged areas, and redirect molten metal safely. The Hive's survival was a testament to planning, courage, and the unity of its people.
From afar, Spider-Man observed faint traces of chaos energy, remnants of the mastermind's influence. He knew the battle was not truly over. The threat lingered, waiting for weakness. Yet for now, the Hive was alive, its people protected, and its spirit unbroken. Vigilance would remain, but hope had been restored. Lyra and Spider-Man coordinated patrols, establishing watch points, evacuation routes, and early warning systems. Civilians were trained in basic defense and observation, creating a resilient network of survival. The Hive, scarred but alive, became a testament to courage, foresight, and unity. Spider-Man perched atop the central spire, looking toward the horizon where smoke and fire mingled with dawn. The battle had tested every skill, every instinct, and every decision. Yet he had endured, protected the innocent, and given hope to a city that had known only despair. Sparks and light glinted off twisted metal, reflecting both destruction and renewal. Lyra approached, her gaze steady. "The Hive remembers," she said, "and so will its people. You've left a mark that cannot be erased, both as a protector and as a symbol. The future may bring more trials, but tonight you've proven that even in the darkest places, courage and hope can endure." Spider-Man nodded,
embracing the weight of both responsibility and inspiration. As night gave way to a pale dawn, Spider-Man swung through the Hive's spires one last time, surveying the city he had protected. Fires burned faintly, scaffolds stood reinforced, civilians moved cautiously but confidently, and the Enclave remained vigilant. The Hive was scarred but alive, its spirit renewed. Armed with webs, skill, and unwavering determination, Spider-Man embraced his role as the web of faith, guardian, symbol, and eternal protector in a city forever shaped by shadows, chaos, and resilience.
The Hive was quiet now, though its scars were visible in every twisted scaffold, every scorched street, and every shuttered window. Spider-Man perched atop the central spire, the early light of dawn casting long shadows over the city he had fought to protect. The echoes of chaos still lingered faintly, a whisper in the twisted alleys, a flicker of warp energy in the distance. But for now, the immediate threat had passed. Civilians emerged from their shelters, tentative but resilient, their eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and awe. Children played amid the safe zones, laughter mingling with the distant groans of the Hive's machinery. Adults moved with renewed purpose, rebuilding what had been broken, reclaiming their city one scaffold, one street, one act of courage at a time. Spider-Man watched them, knowing that his webs had done more than protect. They had inspired, united, and strengthened the people of the Hive. Lyra stood beside him, her gaze steady and contemplative. "The Hive will endure," she said quietly, "because of you, because of what you've shown them, courage, resilience, and hope. But remember, Spider-Man, the shadows never truly fade. Chaos waits, and the Inquisition watches. This is only one victory in a war that never ends." Spider-Man nodded, feeling the weight of her words settle over him. He had swung through fire and warp, battled cultists and monstrous abominations, faced the scrutiny of the Inquisition, and yet survived. He had become more than a protector. He was a symbol, a living thread connecting hope to a city built on chaos and steel. He looked out over the Hive, letting the cool breeze of morning wash over him. The battle was over, but the city's story continued. Somewhere in the shadows, new threats stirred. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the web of chaos waited. And somewhere, the people of the Hive, scarred, resilient, and courageous, would continue to survive. With a deep breath, Spider-Man launched himself from the spire, swinging gracefully between the towering scaffolds, his webs carrying him across the labyrinthine streets. The city stretched endlessly beneath him, alive with possibility, danger, and hope. For now, the Hive was safe, but the web of faith never rested, and neither would he.